good at they are. And the law enforcement center won't actually tell me who the license plate belongs to. So. Okay. But anyway, it's always an adventure. All right, well, are we up and running? Not quite yet. Another minute or so. How's everybody doing?
Staying warm.
What? Staying warm?
Staying warm.
Okay. Good. I'll go ahead and give you a packet for the next who knows how long. This is what we started last week. It will be going for a lot of weeks. I'm guessing as cold as it is, Gloria will not be here. And it is still not prepared for how it felt.
Steve.
Okay. You know what? I'll put this here, and if he does come in,
It's there.
it's there.
Hey, Gloria planned to, she was gonna bring me something, but she probably stuck her moves out and thought better.
Well, I looked it up before I left. It was 0 degrees with a 23-degree wind chill. And then I looked at the warning for this evening, cold weather warning from the National Weather Service, says that throughout the course of the night, with the wind and dropping temperatures, we're looking at about 35 below wind chill. I thought, we'll just stay nice and warm in here for a little while.
It's cold enough that our weather station,
Okay.
so we can't tell anymore. How cold it is, how the wind is blowing and so on. It's just, nope, too cold for it.
All right, well, let's jump in here and ask the Lord for his help, and then we'll take a look at this next section. Father, you have a goal. You have a goal for the entire creation. It is the mission that you announced back at 2:14. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters come to the sea. Your goal is a creation that reflects your glory, that embraces your glory, that exalts in your glory, that yields to and enjoys your glory. And I pray, Father, tonight as we turn our attention to Proverbs 16 and perhaps another verse after that, that you will help us to understand that as we make goals that align with your will, we are doing what you do. And that means we are participating in the divine nature. So I pray, Lord, you will help us to understand clearly, to respond faithfully, and to, Lord, enjoy you gladly in all you're going to do tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. I've been thinking as I was working through and finishing up these notes this morning, how often, at least in my experience, when people present the gospel to someone else who's not heard it before, when they do this thing called evangelizing, telling the good news and inviting people to understand sin and salvation and grace and mercy and all of those things, very often in my experience, it was a little bit one-sided in the sense that we presented the need for salvation. We presented sin as a reality for all people. We presented the need for grace, for forgiveness. We presented the mercy and compassion of God in sending his son Jesus. But what sometimes we failed to do was to tell people that we were not simply inviting them to a one-time event. We were not simply inviting them to an opportunity to put their faith in Jesus, and that would be the end of it. When Jesus called people to come and follow him, he said to Peter and James and John out in their fishing boats, come follow me and I will make you fishers of men. He invited them into a lifetime and a lifestyle of discipleship. And he set before them a goal. Disciples in antiquity had this goal. Their life goal, when they committed to becoming a disciple, was to become as much like their teacher as they could. Discipleship is about becoming as much like Jesus as we can and spending our lives doing that. One of the things that I look back in history in the last 50 years and say one of the things that some of our presentations failed to do, we help people understand the need for grace, we help them understand the need for mercy, we help them understand the need for salvation, but we did not help them understand that when they accepted that, they were accepting the call to be disciples. And I want to make sure that you understand that that's the invitation Christ set before all of us. Not only to trust Him for salvation, for forgiveness of sins, but to continually trust Him to be transformed so the way that we are and the way that we live every day becomes more and more like Him. That's what discipleship is about. And as we've gone through this little course, if you will, on Back to the Basics, we are looking at the basic foundational concepts of discipleship. My goal in all of this is to help you be disciples, the kind of disciples that you would want to be, and the kind of disciples that Jesus would want you to be. So when we come to this idea of setting goals, I want you to see that in the context of being disciples. The goal of all of this is to understand who Jesus is so that we can commit to being like Him. Knowing that that is His work in our lives to make us like Himself, to fit us for dwelling and living with Him forever in heaven. Okay? That's what it's all about. So that's why when we get down this idea of goals, it becomes kind of important. This is not just a cool thing to talk about, because so many people in the world these days are taking leadership training, they're taking business management training, and one of the things you learn in leadership training and business training and all the rest of that is you have to set goals. You have to set goals for your business, you have to set goals for your personal life, you have to set goals for your career, you have to set goals for your kids, and all the rest of that. We are completely inundated with this idea of setting goals. And I wanted you to understand that setting goals is a part of discipleship. Because, number one, God assumes the people set goals. And we saw that last week when we looked at Proverbs 15:22, Proverbs 20:18. We saw that God assumes that people set goals. Now, the question I have is, I'm assuming that you set goals as well. Do you? Or is this kind of all just stuff you're willing to listen to, but it doesn't really matter? Do you set goals?
Yeah.
I bet you do. How many goals you set, Jerry?
I don't kind of write down a list of things that I'm going to accomplish, but like, I mean, every day I come in and this is what I gotta do, I list them out. And I try to get everything done every day.
How many days do you work in the store? Out of the week.
Usually 5, sometimes 6.
So 5 or 6 out of 7. Okay? I'd be willing to guess that every day you probably set a mental goal to be at work the next day.
Yeah.
Right? And most of us do that. I set a goal every Sunday to have a sermon ready for the next Sunday. Sometimes I actually am far enough on the ball that I set a goal in January to lay out at least 6 months of sermons, and I usually in July I start thinking about Advent. To at least by September have all the themes chosen. Okay? Because I know it's coming, I know it's out there. And I know I don't want to wait till the last minute. So I'll set the goal of having some measure of preparation done. And you all do the same thing. Jared says, okay, next week I'm looking at the schedule, I'm going to be here 5 days out of 7. I'm taking this day off and that day off. Those are all goals. Now they're short-term goals, okay, but sometimes we make long-term goals. in 1990, 1990 something, 93? Yes, 1993. Lynn and I bought a life insurance policy in northwestern Israel. We had a goal. We had a goal that if anything happened between that moment and the time I turned 70, there would be enough cash available for her to do what she needed to do to keep her for the rest of her life. So we set a goal that every year we would pay that premium. And then we switched it to Prudential in 2002 or 6, somewhere around there, and we reestablished that goal. And I just got a note the other day that in 2026, the premiums are changing because I'll be 66 or something like that. And so now we're going to have to reevaluate that goal. Okay? We do goals like that all the time, all of us do. So God assumes that people set goals. But he doesn't just make the assumption that we talked about last week. He does something else. And God does something else. And what would you think, just looking at this sentence, what do you think he might say? Since God assumes that people set goals, what might be the second thing?
Shows.
Okay, shows would be a good word. Determines would be a great word.
I
What?
thought knows.
All right. Knows is a okay word. Not a bad word.
Guides.
Guides, that's a good word. What do these three words, not so much knows, knows is going to be the foundational word for these. So what God knows, he shows. What he knows, he determines. What he knows, he guides. What would be the no, it's too hard for me to do it that way. I'm thinking of the word defines. God defines how goals should be what? Set. Okay. We find in Scripture that God assumes that people set goals, but we also find that God defines how goals should be set. Okay. And that's going to take us to Proverbs 16:3.
Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established.
Okay? Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. That's how God defines how God should be set, how goals should be set. What's the first word in that verse?
Commit.
Commit. What does that mean?
What you're gonna do,
What's that?
that you're going to follow through.
Okay? Means that you're going to do something. All right? Let's define that a little bit further. Does the word commit say something about the timing and the nature of your follow through?
You're going to spend time and effort to accomplish
Okay?
something.
does the word commit tell us something about the time and the effort that are going to be made in the follow-through?
That's to the Lord's wishes.
Okay? We're going to come to that. That's the next part we're going to get. Focusing right here on commit. What does this word tell us about what you all said? That we're going to follow through, we're going to put some time and effort in. What does this word commit? How does it help us understand what that looks like?
And do whatever it takes.
What's that?
Whatever it takes, as much time, as much effort, as it takes.
Okay. All right.
Means your will
Okay.
is to, yeah,
A dedicated will.
Yep.
Is saying, I'll get around to it, the same as commitment? I'll get around to it, it's just as I am going to follow through. Well, what is my attitude towards something if I say I'll get around to it? My attitude is casual rather than intentional, right? So commit has this nuance of intensity and intentionality. Right? It has something else. And it certainly has this idea of whatever it takes.
Maybe by saying that God's willing.
Okay? All right? And we're going
I'll be
to
here tomorrow if God's willing. you know.
Okay. Related to God's will. Okay. So, a couple of years ago, Linda and I committed to buying a van. And I've been paying $363 a month for that van. Right? I sat down the other day looking at the bank statements. Realized that out of whatever it is we paid for that van, we had $6,200 left. And probably 3 years. Something like that, maybe. Okay? And I got to look at it, thought, oh man, if I put together this, put that over there, I move this around here, I can pay that off. I can have it done before Christmas. I thought about it. You know, we try to live without any commercial retail debt other than our mortgage. Okay, I've gathered together from this savings account and this place and that place, and put it together the exact right payoff amount. I sat there and looked at it. I had the transfer page open on the website for the financial institution. I prayed about it. I went and talked to Linda about it. She agreed. Went back downstairs, sat at my desk, looked at it, and then I pressed the button. And a little window with my loan account disappeared. Because for the website, since the loan was paid for, the account no longer existed. When I pressed that button, the possibility of retracting that payment was gone. Okay? When I pushed that button, I committed to that payoff. I couldn't change it, I couldn't retract it, and whatever else comes along, I have to deal with it. Okay? It's mine now. It's my responsibility. I committed to an immediate action with a permanent, long-term effect. I dedicated myself as an act of will to the consequences of my decision. Okay? That's what commit is. Commit's like, you know, it was a little bit of a commitment to commit to making the payments. You know, but I could always stave those out, do whatever, this and that, lots of leeway there. But when I made the payoff, that was a major commitment. Okay? That's what this word means. This is not just take out a loan for grace. This is commit your life to grace. This means to entrust your life in all of its components, past, present, and future, to the mercy and the sovereignty of God. You know, people see that and say, oh, commit your work to the Lord and plans for yourself. Oh, yeah. We'll just let him know what's going on and everything will be fine. It doesn't just say announce or declare or publish your work to the Lord. It doesn't mean just, you know, kneel down on the side of your bed and say, hey, Lord, tomorrow we're going to go fishing and this and that and the other thing. You know, be nice or be blessed and go your way. That's not what it means. It means to take into account the nature of what you are going to set into his hands, because when you put them there, you're going to leave them there. No takebacks. Okay? And this is something that we really have to understand, because I think in a lot of ways we have made discipleship about come to Jesus and get blessed. And we've made commitment about this enjoyable interaction of grace and us. But you know, when Jesus laid down that cross and let him nail them to it, that's what commitment looks like. And Jesus says to his disciples, to those of his disciples, take up your cross, deny yourself every day, and follow me. That's commitment. So, commitment is the idea of nailing your life to the cross of Christ. So understand that, because it's kind of important. Commitment is not this half-hearted, well, you know, I'll hang around as long as it feels good. Or I'll be here as long as I like the music. Or I'll be here until they turn the heat down to 66 degrees, then I'm out of here. Okay? Commitment is saying this is no longer going to be about me. It's going to be about Jesus.
So it's not saying that I'll try, but I'm only human.
I'll try, but I'm only human is a nice way of avoiding commitment. No? I mean, we may come to a point where we understand this commitment is more than humanly possible, which shouldn't surprise us, because we're called to rely upon God. And God is able to do more than humanly possible, right? We're going to find ourselves in situations where God is going to say, I want you in a position of utter weakness so I can do through you what you cannot do for yourself, and I'm going to glorify myself to you and everybody watching. And the commitment says, whatever you want. Done deal. A commitment says to God, in a lot of ways, it's like the best thing about marriage. You know, and I ask them, do you take this person to be your lawfully wedded, whichever, for better, for worse, in sickness and health, for richer, for poorer, to death you part, that's commitment. That's the difference, by the way. You know, people say to me, well, I don't know why we have to be married, get married, it's just a piece of paper. No, this is what it is. This is what people who live together without marriage have not done. And not to, you know, they may think they made a commitment to each other, but they've not made a commitment to which they are held responsible, not only by people, but by God. That's where, whatever form it takes, whatever form marriage takes in a given culture, the commitment is the issue. All right, so the very first word in Proverbs 16:3, when God is going to define how goals should be set, they should be set with commitment. And we should understand that. But what are we committing? What's it saying? Commit your. So what is that? What is work?
Everything you do.
No, it's not some work. Everything you do. Okay? Which is everything you plan. Which is every goal you set. Commit your work to the Lord. Work. All the stuff you do. But what work? Oh, you say everything you do, believe it seriously. The dishes?
Everything.
Come on, everything, really.
You could leave your dishes in the sink and let them stack up, and you could then get critters and bugs and diseases and
Yeah.
make yourself sick.
Yeah. Commit your work. What are we doing? You're right.
Become this.
You're right. But this word, everything, so often that's the right answer. But it's one of those words where we use it so much and we know it's the right answer that it doesn't really grab us. What does commit your work, everything you do, what does that really mean?
Well, it's just like the verse that be thankful for everything, in all things. Be thankful in all things.
Okay?
So that's why I say everything.
And everything's a fine word. But what does this really mean in real time and real life? Now, we just talked about the nature of committing our work, what we do. How do you commit everything you do, how do you commit everything you do to the Lord?
Being thankful and being.
Okay, let's look at it. If I'm going to commit everything I do to the Lord, here's my definition. I'm going to do, when do I commit it?
All the time.
How do I commit it? What am I committing? Why am I committing it? And who am I committing it to? When do I commit my work to the Lord?
Always.
Always is a good answer. I can live with that one. But what direction does always look?
At all times.
Okay, at all times, which are when?
Now. Present and future.
Now, present, future forever. Okay. Yes. Do I commit my work to the Lord before or after I start?
Before, during, and after.
Before, during, and after. This is what always means, at all times, and now, present, future, forever. Okay? So these are really good words. They're great words as long as you understand that when we're talking about committing the work of the Lord, you don't typically, ideally, we don't say, okay, I'm going to get started on this, see how it goes. If it goes good, then I'll commit it to the Lord. Lord, I'm planning on something, and I'd like to commit it to you before I even start planning. I'm going to commit to planning. And then I'm gonna strategize how to make it happen. I'm going to commit to strategy. And then I'm going to start implementing it. I'm going to commit to implementation. Before, during, and after is what this means. This is an ongoing commit, keep committing. And commit everything, which means committed always, at all times, now, present, future, and forever. So if you're going to do this, how do you do it? You're going to do it actively, intentionally,
Best of your ability.
consistently, competently, willfully, see, we sometimes want to jump right into the pragmatic. Like, I'm gonna write in my journal that today I'm gonna commit this and this and this to the Lord, and I'll put it in writing, okay, and we think, well, that's one way to do it, or any number of ways of thinking how it looks like what I'm actually gonna do physically. Well, before you do all of that, this is what we're talking about. When we talk about commit your work to the Lord, we're talking about making a cognizant, I'm going to use that word too, a cognizant act of will to actively, intentionally, consistently, competently, willfully put everything I do into the hands of God. Now, if I'm going to do that, well, what am I going to do that with? See, that's where the everything I do comes in. So let me simplify this. What would you not commit to the Lord? What?
Quitting.
Quitting. What else?
My sins.
You're not going to commit those to the Lord. You're going to do something else with those, right? You're going to confess those. You confess your sins, you commit your work. Okay? So let's kind of realize there's some differentiation that happens here. Now, why are we going to commit our work to the Lord? Why are we going to commit everything we do to the Lord? Okay, for the glory. And how about because there's a promise? You know, a way of honoring God who makes promises is trusting his promises and receiving what's promised. I've tried to illustrate this with you before, but I'll do it again. Let's say it's Christmas. And for Christmas, let's make it so far-fetched that you'll just have to go with the idea. Let's say for Christmas, I buy each of you a bar of gold. And I wrap it up, and on the Sunday morning on the 22nd, have them all underneath the Christmas tree here in the sanctuary, and I say, after the service, I want you to come up and get your Christmas present. And what I've gotten for you all this year is I've gotten each of you a bar of gold. I sold my house, I sold my car, I've made an indentured servant out of my wife, I've done everything necessary to commit to you this gift of our love for you, this bar of gold. We've done it freely, we've done it gladly. It's the joy of our heart to do this for you. And so here's this bar of gold. Okay? Now let's assume as well that we've made this heartfelt sacrifice to provide this bar of gold. And the reason we've gotten you a bar of gold is because we know that in the current economic times, we've gotten word that everything's about to collapse, and the only thing that's going to have value is going to be something like gold. Currency is going to dissipate, credit's going to collapse. So having a physical bar of gold will actually serve you. Okay? So you come up on Sunday morning, and you agree to take a bar of gold. You take it home. And the economy collapses. And you start with that. Because you thought, I don't really, that bar of gold, that's too nice. He probably didn't really mean for us to have it. He didn't really mean for us to keep it. He didn't really mean for us to use it. We should just hold on to it. We'll put it in the closet somewhere. We'll just know we have it. And you start with it. My intent to save your lives out of my sacrifice has been dishonored because you didn't take what I gave in the spirit in which it was given and use it. Okay? So the way in which we honor a gift giver is not just by taking the gift and then sticking it in the closet. The way that we honor a gift giver is taking that gift and putting it to use for the purpose it was intended. Right? That makes sense? So God promises to give you grace. God promises to give you mercy. God promises to give you forgiveness. God promises to give you strength. God promises to give you wisdom. God promises to be present with you, to never leave you or forsake you, that underneath are the everlasting arms. Over and over again in myriad ways, God says to you, I'm going to be with you, I am for you, I love you, I'm on your side. Better than that of all, I'm above and around and under and everywhere. You are in the middle of the love of Christ. You are completely surrounded by me. So take what I'm giving and use it for your benefit. And you go, I've been done. I'm fine. I can do it on my own. I'll call you if I need you. I'll pray as a last resort. When I've done everything else, then what I'll pray. Okay? The why here is because there's a promise. Commit your work to the Lord. Here's the command, and your plans will be established. Here's the promise. Do you want your plans for a godly life to be realized? God promises they are. So the way in which that promise comes to pass is by obeying the command. So what, we said a minute ago, I got to get more colors. We said a minute ago that commitment is a dedicated act of will. Right? This is a verb. This is a do something. This is a do something. God has promised that when you make this decision and act upon this dedicated act of will, and you follow through with time and effort of whatever it takes related to His will and everything you do, and you do it before, during, and after, actively, intentionally, consistently, confidently, willfully, and cognizantly, when you do this thing, God says, I'm going to make it glorious. Your plans will be established. Do you believe it? What's one way in which you might believe that godly goals in your life will actually be realized? What's one way that you can actively pursue that in your life? Commitment. God, I want to be a godly man. I want to be a godly woman. I want to set an example. I want people to see you in me. I want to be faithful. I want to be gracious. I want to be, you name it. What is it you want to do relative to who God is? Commit that. Because He's already made you the promise. You want to see the promise come true? Do the command. Okay? And how is any of this likely to actually be true? Who are you committing to? Who?
God.
Who? Who is He?
Should I say everything?
I'm not going to accept everything.
The one who's.
I will accept anything, but not everything. Listen, who is this?
The one who's sovereign over all.
All right, so He's sovereign. And that means what?
It means He the boss. What He.
All right, you're right. You're right. But if you simply say He's the boss, I know bossy people who can't make anything happen.
He's our Father.
All right, He's our Father.
He's our Savior.
He's our Savior. He's our Creator. Right? Who is He?
He is Lord.
He is Lord. He's gracious. He's kind. Here we go, ready? He's compassionate. Come on, give it to me. Who is He?
Loving.
He's loving. He's wise. He's just. He's righteous. He's holy. Come on. He's everywhere. He's all powerful. He's all knowing. Why go through all this? Why remind ourselves of this? Because who are we talking about committing everything to?
The only one that's really,
The only one that's worthy, and His worthiness guarantees what?
is commitment to us.
All right, that's exactly right. Worthiness guarantees faithfulness. Because of who God is, you can count on Him to be faithful. You can count on Him to do well by His commitment. You can count on Him to keep His promise. You can count on Him to make up the difference when your commitment begins to flag. See, this commitment is not simply, Let me go back to my little buy the car example. All right? I bought the car and got an auto loan with a company I knew nothing about. I had no idea what my experience was gonna be. I assumed that as long as I made the payments, they wouldn't come after the car. Okay? I assumed that they would keep their end of the bargain, but I had no personal knowledge of who they were, what they were like, what their business practices were. There were three or four possibilities. Bob and Hibbing Dodge or whatever they are over there, Chrysler Center. They offered 3 or 4 people, companies, pick one. They had the lowest rate, the easiest way to pay for it. I picked it, but I had no idea who was receiving my commitment. You know who's receiving your commitment. So what does that do for the quality of your commitment? Guarantees it. Motivates it, right? It improves it. It grounds and establishes it. I'm going to commit my everything to someone whose worthiness guarantees their faithfulness. He will not fail. But I want to go back to this idea of what our work is. Because everything we do is right, but it's vague enough that you might not make enough of the connections. The work of worship is assisted by commitment. I'm going to commit my worship to Him. The work of forgiveness is a work of commitment. The work of parenting is a commitment. The work of grieving is a commitment. Everything you do, the easy things and the hard things, the call of Christ is commit them to the Lord. So that's the kind of thinking that just going with everything you do, you might miss some of that. And that's why I ask you to delineate everything. Because there are some things that you might not think of that will be real treasures when you understand what God calls you to commit to. Praying for your loved ones who don't know Jesus is a commitment.
And I feel too, when you commit to it, if you fall short, people will help you, boost you up in your efforts.
Yeah. And there's the promise. Because look what it says, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. When you, in your committing, run out of strength, God says, I got this. I got this.
I like the King James because it says your thoughts will be established.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like your plans, you might write down in your notebook, but your thoughts are your plans in your head.
What gets complicated about all this to me is if you commit everything to God, what do you have for you besides God? I mean, should you drive a rattle trap car that breaks down and you don't get there half the time? I mean, we have to make decisions on what's gonna be ours and what we've gotta do to work most effectively and everything. And that's where it gets kind of foggy in between the two. That's what is kind of difficult.
So Gene, my response to that is to start with this question, okay? And go, and then delineate the answer to that from this answer. The question is, what, if we commit everything to God, what is there for us? And it's a fair question for what we're talking about, in this idea of commitment. It's an essential question, actually. But here's the first part of the equation. What do you want or need that outvalues God? If before we get to the practical part, because we gotta get to the practical part, but let's put it answer that question in perspective here, and let's say, what is it about all the things that I may want or need, the choices that I have to make, the choices I'm allowed to make, the things I want, and the choices I have to make, things I need, what in all of that, if I'm left with nothing but God, have I missed out? Okay? When you get the answer to that, then what you will find out is, if you got your papers right there with you, let me see, I'm pretty sure I put it in here. Go to go to the next to last page. All right, the next to last page, number 12 at the top. See it? 2 Peter 1, 5 to 9. The verses right before that. 2 Peter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Chapter 1, verses 2, 3, and 4. They're that's not clear for you. Look at number 12.
It was the third to the
Right there.
last page.
All right, oh, I'm sorry, third to last page. All right, number 12. This passage, 2 Peter 1, 5 through 9. Okay? In the Bible, verses 2, 3, and 4 come before verse 5. Okay? So, 2 Peter, not 1 Peter, 2 Peter 1, verse 2, verse 3, and verse 4. Say something very, very important.
That ESV, this minus
Here's what it says. God's divine power has granted to us, turned over to us, bestowed upon us, right? All things that pertain to life and godliness. That verse, 2 Peter 1, 3. Says this. When you have God, He will give you everything you need. You see it? He will take care of the necessities. Now, how does He do that? Well, first of all, He defines what's necessary and what isn't. Does that mean, because in our mobile culture, we need a way to get around, does that mean that we have to all drive around mountain traps? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is that God will give you what is necessary for the life to which He has called you. I know some very, very wealthy people. I know some very wealthy people who are Christians. And they have come to understand that the reason God gives them what He gives them is because He's making them the agent of His generosity in the lives of other people. They have nice things. And they give a lot of money to other people. God doesn't say, oh, you listen, I'm giving you all the money, you can't use it here for yourself, then go away. God does do that for some people. When I was growing up, the pastor of the sister church to mine in Columbus was a builder and a pastor. And he took no salary at all from the church. Okay? And he got so he completely sustained his family on his building revenues. And at least I'm aware of, 4 years in a row, the IRS audited him because he could document that 50% of his income he gave away to charities. Okay?
Just couldn't deal with that, could
There's no concept of people, but listen, I know people who have done that. He drove a Cadillac. White one with red interior. Okay? Back in the 70s. So, how do we know when we can do that? How do we know when God says, you know what, I want you to build a school in Haiti, and so I want you to drive a rattle trap so you can do that. How do we know that? Well, that's when we have God. Because what happens is when God becomes our primary value, He then is the one who sets all the other values. And we're able to be content with that because we know where it's coming from. Back over here to this. Okay? And Gene, that's why you'll hear me say it over and over and over again. Good questions like that, very good questions like that. The answer should start with God. Because that's where God calls us to start. Figure out what the nature of the relationship is between Him and us. And when that relationship is right, He will direct all the rest of life, including giving us what He says there, I've given everything you need to retain the life of godliness. And it would be interesting if He'd only said, I've given you everything you need pertaining to godliness. Then we would know, oh, okay, God only cares about spiritual stuff. But He doesn't. He says life and godliness, all the other things that we have need of.
And it doesn't have to be just physical necessities. There's a phone call I get a couple times a month, and I look and I think, oh, okay. But then I get reminded, the Lord reminds me that time is His. You know, the time is not mine, the time is His, and I need to use that time in that way, you know, with that person. But I need the reminder that it's not my time, it's God's time, you know, being used in that manner. You know, nothing to do with money, nothing to do with where we live, but it's not my time, it's time that God has granted me. But he says how it's going to be used for the next hour and a half.
Right. So things like time, how you come this way, time, talents, treasures. That's what we're committing. But we're committing them to one whose heart for us is to do us good. It's not like we're committing to someone whose only interest is to take from us or to keep us subjected in a way that there is no joy.
That's a good answer, because otherwise, we'd all either be monks or ministers.
Right. Right. But we're all
We're not all cut out to do that.
we're all regular people, and those commitments, in many ways, are tailor-made to the life that God leads us into. You know?
I've been reading Ecclesiastes 3. You know, the time to put the second half, or not the second half, but 9 through 15 talks about what gain has the worker from his toil. And I've been reading that and rereading it, and it kind of talks to the same thing. And I don't know, yeah.
There's a book out in.
I was gonna say,
Catch up.
somebody wrote a book
There's
about it.
a book on the
We,
table out there,
we
you ought to
did a
pick up.
study, while he was writing the book, we did the study on Ecclesiastes, and it was very good.
But yeah, I mean, that's what Solomon is saying. If you take a look at this, and you're doing all this stuff, and you're doing all this stuff, and you're doing all this stuff, and you wonder, in the end, I worked for it, and I can't hold on to it past death. You know, I'm gonna give it up. I love what he says. We'll give it up, and somebody else is gonna misuse it after I did all that. We'll spend it foolishly. You know, so what good is it? It's all I can do. But where he comes up at the end of the book, the last 2 verses at the end of the book is what is the entire sum of everything he's doing. When the commitment is to God, he gives all the rest of that meaning and purpose. But without this commitment to God, without God being the primary and being the greatest value, all this is work. And all that gain, it's just something somebody else is going to get when I'm done with it. What about it?
It's just toil without any joy.
Right. Right. Because no matter how hard you work, the paycheck has a limit. And there's only so much you do it. And then you're going to go work and get some more. And even if you do all that, you want to buy something, then you buy the thing, but the thing that means you don't have the resources anymore. You got the thing. It's constant trying to gain through effort. And the gain never quite meets the effort. You know, and in Ecclesiastes, it's because death neutralizes everything. So he's like, okay, well then where do we get any value out of it? Here's where you get the value. Because you can look at that and say, if I'm committed my plans to the Lord, and he establishes my plans, that means, I mean, okay, just for me, it's easier for me to make examples about what I know that I've done than to guess what you guys are doing, okay? And this way, you know, if I get it wrong, it's done. When I pushed that button, I had to think about what it meant, what God had to do to put Linda and I in a position to have that, to do that button. That was not my wisdom. I'm not that smart. I'm just not that financially acute. God did that. And God let me honor a commitment that we made to not accumulate debt. God allowed that to happen so we could meet that commitment. God did that. And if there's a crisis that comes up, he'll take care of that too. Because that's who he is. And that's what it means. That's how he handles my commitments. Faithful. Okay? That enough to chew on for one night?
How's Linda?
With a mindset that she's going to get better, this is not going to overwhelm her, and we're still struggling.
What do you expect? It's a small.
At this point, she is learning what it means to commit her ways. So we appreciate you keep praying for us.
Talked to Jalen today.
Oh, yeah?
I asked him a question. I said, how many miles did you travel